The Trump administration warned Apple against using Chinese-made memory semiconductors. According to a report by the Wall Street Journal, Howard Lutnick, the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, visited Apple's manufacturing facility in Texas and said in an interview with reporters that the Trump administration does not support it. He stated that there should be another solution to the memory issue, but great American companies should not be using Chinese-made memory. When asked if he had conveyed this opinion to Apple, Secretary Lutnick emphasized that he had clearly warned Apple. In effect, the Trump administration has issued a warning to Apple. Previously, the Trump administration had no clear stance on Apple's actions, but this recent shift is expected to hinder Apple's use of Chinese-made memory. First, let's take a look at what exactly Apple has done. Right now, Apple is in quite a crisis. Currently, in the global semiconductor market, competition among companies trying to build AI data centers is ongoing, and as a result, the demand for memory is rapidly increasing. AI servers require high-performance memory for large-scale computations, and the share of high-value-added products like HBM is rising. Accordingly, memory manufacturers are focusing their production capacity on AI-related products, which is also affecting their ability to supply general memory used in smartphones and PCs. For Apple, this situation is even more burdensome. To mass-produce products like the iPhone and MacBook, Apple needs to secure a huge amount of memory reliably every year. If they can't secure the desired quantity at the right time, it could affect their production schedule and cost management. Additionally, memory production can't be quickly expanded when demand rises. Building new production facilities and installing equipment requires substantial time and money, making it hard to quickly address sudden supply shortages. However, since Apple doesn't have its own memory semiconductor production facilities, it has to secure a supply of memory semiconductors somehow. Apple, aiming to boost its operating profits, tried partnering with China and tested memory chips from China's Changxin memory. Reports indicate Apple isn't just testing them, but has also started an initial supply agreement to get general-purpose memory from Changxin memory. As a result, there are growing voices of concern even within the United States. Right now, Changxin Memory has been designated as a company linked to the Chinese People's Liberation Army and is already on the US government's watch list. But as Apple tried to partner with Changxin Memory, public opinion within the United States was on the verge of an uproar. On top of that, Apple even started lobbying extensively so that the US could import Chinese-made memory. It seems that the Trump administration managed to block this appropriately. Of course, there are also other interpretations regarding the background of Apple's push to negotiate with Changxin Memory. In fact, some analysts believe that rather than aiming to introduce Chinese-made memory on a large scale, Apple's real intention is to bring in a Chinese company as a new potential supplier to secure more favorable terms in price negotiations with its existing memory suppliers. For Apple, just having Changxin Memory as an option, in addition to existing suppliers like Samsung Electronics, SK Hynix, and Micron, gives them one more card to play during negotiations. Especially since Apple is a company that purchases large quantities, even a slight decrease in memory prices can have a significant impact on the overall product cost. Some speculate that negotiating with Changxin Memory may be a tactic to pressure current suppliers to reduce prices. Micron was one of the companies that reacted most strongly to this move. From Micron's perspective, if Apple actually adopts Chinese-made memory, it could help Chinese companies secure global customers and could also put pressure on the US memory industry. They say this would quickly harm US national interests, especially if Apple uses the possibility of using Chinese-made memory as a negotiation tool. Existing suppliers could face price pressure or other forms of pressure, so it's a situation where Micron has no choice but to react sensitively. A new variable has emerged, differing from Apple's expectations. Reports say Changxin Memory has not responded to Apple's pricing or other demands. For Changxin Memory, there isn't much need to offer Apple a particularly low price. This is because there is high demand for memory within China, and the supply for local big tech companies is also insufficient. Here, there's no reason to keep supplying Apple at a lower price, as it would cut profitability. Apple sought a new supplier to boost its bargaining power with current companies, but since Changxin Memory didn't compete on price as much as Apple wanted, the situation has become more complicated. Additionally, the US government has publicly opposed using Chinese-made memory, creating an unexpected burden for Apple during negotiations. For Apple, its attempt to diversify its supply chain has instead resulted in burdens from both the US and China. They've really been singled out. It's understandable, as Apple has previously tried to partner with China. Back in 2022, Apple conducted significant technical verification work to ensure that the semiconductors from Yangji memory technology met Apple's strict quality standards. But when the news about this supply cooperation came out, there was a strong backlash from the US political circles. Both the Democratic and Republican parties were up in arms. It got to the point where even the US Congress was ready to step in over Apple's playing with fire. After that, Apple had no choice but to suspend its cooperation with Yangji Memory. But now, less than 5 years later, they're doing something similar again, so it's understandable that the US government would be very upset. Now, even US political circles are directly pressuring Apple. It is reported that 6 US senators sent a letter to Apple demanding a promise not to use semiconductors from China's Changxin memory technologies and Yangji memory technologies. US political circles worry about more than just the price or quality of Chinese-made memory. They also worry these companies' ties to China's semiconductor industry could affect US national security and supply chain policies. In particular, what's notable about this letter is that it even set a clear deadline for Apple's response. The lawmakers demanded that Apple state by August 21 that it will not use semiconductors from China's Changxin memory and Yangji memory from using semiconductors from China's Changxin memory and Yangji memory. It's essentially an ultimatum. US politicians setting a deadline and demanding a response on a company's supply chain decisions highlights how sensitive they consider this issue. Apple's actions have sparked a stronger response from politicians, as the company is now actively negotiating to use Chinese-made components, not just reviewing the option. Moreover, it's important to note that concerns about this issue are being raised across the US political spectrum, regardless of party affiliation. Opponents say that using Chinese-made semiconductors in Apple products sold in the US could still boost Chinese semiconductor companies' production and sales. Because Apple has such a huge influence on the global supply chain, even if the actual usage is limited, it could still boost the credibility and customer base of Chinese companies in the global semiconductor market. Apple now faces challenges making decisions based only on corporate supply chain options. Depending on what position Apple presents to US political circles by August 21, discussions about introducing Chinese-made memory could grow larger in the future, or, conversely, move in the direction of reducing negotiations. The very fact that the US political circles have even presented a specific deadline shows that the issue of Apple introducing Chinese-made semiconductors has become a highly sensitive political matter in the United States. So what would happen if Apple actually decides to adopt Changxin Memory's commodity memory? Chinese memory firms have mostly grown by serving the domestic market and a few clients. But if Apple becomes a customer, things could change. Apple is one of the most influential IT companies in the world, and simply being included in Apple's supply chain can be seen as recognition of a certain level of quality and production capability in the global market. If this occurs, other global IT companies might also consider using Chinese-made memory. In fact, in a situation where memory supply shortages and price increases continue, companies looking to reduce costs and diversify their supply chains may be able to secure new suppliers. Doing business with Apple is also very important for Changxin Memory. They've opened a route into the US market, allowing for deeper penetration. If this continues, it could shift the bargaining power of Samsung Electronics, SK Hynix, and Micron. A few companies have dominated the market so far, but if a new major supplier emerges, customers will have more choices. That's why the US government views this as more than just business between companies. The United States now sees the advanced semiconductor supply chain as tied to national security. The US thinks large orders from American firms to Chinese memory companies could speed up China's semiconductor industry growth. Therefore, there is a possibility that the US government will continue to pressure Apple. This is an issue that could go beyond pressure and even lead to sanctions. If Apple went ahead and did it, even after Congress and the government told them not to, they might tear Apple apart. When it comes to national security issues, in the US, both parties are united. Apple may have aimed for more than just memory chips, possibly seeking more suppliers to lower costs and strengthen bargaining power in the memory supply chain. But this time, that choice prevented them from getting the price they wanted in China and brought political pressure in the US. It seems that Apple is truly facing a crisis now.